Friday night. One of the things that we've done over the years that's been a central part of our teaching has been about the 12 needs. And one of the things that I get asked periodically is, are there some needs that are more foundational than others? And so what I want to do tonight is talk about that. Maslow was the first one really to attempt to create a hierarchy of needs, that there's some that if they're not met, then you can't go on and meet the other needs. And so he has Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which begins with the physical. So if you're not getting food and water, you're going to die. So that becomes a foundational priority need, the physical needs. And then, but if you're not safe, you're going to die. So you've got your very basic foundational needs. And then he adds this psychological needs. So the love needs. And so what I would say is that's where we're really going to focus tonight, is on foundational love needs, belonging needs. And I'm going to talk about 8 A's. That I'm going to use A for all of them just to make it simple, but basically it's if those needs aren't met consistently, then there's going to be complex trauma. That's the basis of understanding complex trauma, and so it's the basis of what we teach as well. So it's important to understand, and this is the context I want you to get, is that these 8 A's that we're going to talk about really become the foundation of the emotional, relational, psychological needs, and they become the basis of good parenting. So if you're going to be a good parent, you got to do more than meet the physical needs of your child. You got to meet these 8 A's, the 8 psychological, emotional, relational needs of your child. It's absolutely essential. It's when these 8 A's are met that a child feels loved. And so these 8 A's become the components of the virtue of love. And so I have to know how to do these 8 A's in order to love others, in order to feel loved from others. They're really key components of understanding love. But beyond that, they're the key components of what makes a child feel safe. So it's not just physical safety that a child is attuned to, it's emotional safety. And these are the 8 A's that cause a child to feel emotionally safe. And that results in them feeling secure. That results in them feeling supported, loved, respected, valued. So these 8 A's are essential to the basic pieces of building a healthy life. So what you can see is if these 8 A's aren't met consistently, then the child will have little t trauma. They will have complex trauma. It might not be physical abuse, but to not meet these 8 A's consistently has dire ramifications for a child. So to take that a bit further, it's important to understand that when a child comes into the world, they are dependent on their parents to meet these 8 A's. But as they grow up and get into teen years, they begin to look to others to be involved in meeting those 8 A's as they form other relationships. Then they move on and develop a committed, intimate relationship. And so they look to now their partner, but also themselves to meet those 8 A's. There's a balance now that I have to meet them for myself, but I also need somebody else in an intimate relationship that's still going to be able to meet those. And so that is what begins to develop as they grow up. And so what I want you to understand is how the 8 A's are met changes as a child as we get older. As we mature, how those 8 A's are met changes. There's another piece to this just before we get started, and that is for many people, when they think of the 8 A's that we're going to talk about, it becomes the essence of their own spiritual practice, how they feed their soul, how they nurture their inner child, how they increase self-compassion. And so it's not just thinking of the 8 A's in terms of others meeting the 8 A's. It's, I need to learn how to meet these for myself. That's how I take care of myself. That's how I grow in self-compassion and nurturing my inner child and feeding my soul. And so look at it from those two perspectives, meeting from others of the 8 A's and meeting it for myself. So the first two we've talked about a lot, and I've done talks on them, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but I do want to summarize them because they're so foundational, so important. The first one is attachment. I would say this is such an important one to understand. So if you haven't watched the talks on attachment, please do so. A child comes into the world not able to meet any of their needs. They're a helpless infant. And so they have this drive, this need to attach to somebody who can meet their needs. And so they attach to mom and dad, totally dependent on them. And so what I want you to see is the deepest drive when a child comes into the world is, number one, to attach. I need to connect to somebody, because if I don't, I'm going to die. My needs aren't going to be met. And so in order to survive, I must attach. What researchers have found, and this is the important part, is that if the people this little infant attaches to, mom and dad, aren't very healthy, then their needs aren't going to get met consistently. And that is going to have a profoundly negative effect on the child. The ramifications of that are tremendous. So what does the parent need to do in order to provide this secure, safe attachment to a child? They need to be able to regulate their own emotions, and so they're staying calm. They need to be able to be present to that child and attuned to that child. They need to have good boundaries so that they're consistent with that child. They need to be able to be compassionate and nurturing. Then a child is able to feel safe physically and emotionally with that child, with that parent. They can relax. Their needs are going to get met. That's what is needed. But if the parent's not able to do that, or the parent is wrapped up in all their own stuff and so they neglect the child, or if the parent becomes abusive, then the child is not able to form a secure attachment. What is formed usually is a type of insecure attachment, is what we call it. And there's three basic types that have been categorized of insecure attachment. Again, we've talked about this in other videos. So there's anxious attachment. Can I attach today? Maybe I can, maybe I can't. So you're preoccupied with whether or not I can attach, a lot of anxiety around attachment. And then there's avoidant. I'm just going to avoid attachments because I always get hurt. So you dismiss the value of relationships. Or there's disorganized attachment. So you're fearful, avoidant of attachment, but then want it, and you're kind of all over with that. What I want you to see from that is, and I can't emphasize it enough, is that if there's not secure attachment at every stage of development in childhood, the ramifications, the negative ramifications are profound. And it sets up a child to go about all future relationships based on how those early relationships went. So they go into adult relationships with anxious attachment, with avoidant attachment, and that just sets up the relationship to fail. So let me just emphasize again. If you want to understand complex trauma, one of the important ways to understand complex trauma is that complex trauma takes place when a child doesn't have secure attachment. And so when they don't have secure attachment, then they feel all alone, but they also feel that it's their fault. The reason that the parents didn't attach with them is because they must not be good enough. They must not be lovable. They must not be valuable. And so what comes out of that lack of attachment is not just, this is a scary world, I feel all alone, this isn't safe, complex trauma, but shame. I'm the reason nobody attaches to me. And then that leads to the message of abandonment. I'm here all alone. Nobody wants me. I feel rejection. And so now they move into all adult relationships with the fear of abandonment as part of what drives them. So the fear that if people get to know me like mom and dad did, then they're going to abandon me like mom and dad did. And so I want to connect, but I'm afraid to connect. And that just causes all kinds of problems. And so what happens to a child then is if I can't connect, but I need to connect, but I try to connect and then I get punished, I get neglected, I get shamed, I need to adapt. And so I will wear masks. I will develop different ways of fawning to try to get my needs met by these people who don't seem to want to connect with me. I will become whatever they want me to be in order to get connected so that I get my needs met. And so now a child begins to wear masks, play roles, learn how to fawn. They develop all of these coping styles to survive, but they become maladaptive coping styles in adult life that cause tons and tons of issues. But there's another piece to this. This drive to attach isn't just for infants. It never goes away. All of our life, we need connection. We are driven to find connection. But if I don't feel I can find it in humans, then what do? We try to find it in drugs, alcohol, chemicals. We try to find the feelings of connection by connecting to an activity, to an object. And so that sets up all kinds of addiction issues. Or we just go, I will try to find superficial connection in unhealthy people. And that sets up for lots of superficial relationships and even abusive relationships, but we're driven to connect. And I will chase the feelings of connection without actually risking intimate connection. But I always end up empty and getting hurt. And so hopefully you just get a taste of the ripple effect of lack of attachment is huge. It does so much damage to every part of a person's life. So this attachment need is a foundational driving need right from birth. With that is the second A, and that is authenticity. And so a child comes into the world fully authentic. They are just themselves. They don't know how to be any other way. They just show their little personalities, and very quickly we get to see, oh, they're quite extroverted, they're quite introverted. We get to see how they think. We get to see their emotional makeup, how their brain works. We quickly see their natural talents, their tendencies. All of that is just there. They don't perform, they're just themselves. If a child feels fully accepted and loved, then they're free to explore that personality, their authentic selves, get to know themselves better, get to know what they're good at, and then they get to develop career from that, how to help others from that, how to make a difference in their life. And so authenticity, we just come into the world with that drive. I want to be authentic. And so if a child is able to pursue that, then they develop this positive view of themselves. If they're accepted and loved and encouraged to be authentic, then they go, I have value. Shame is not an issue for them. They like themselves. They see their value. But if they grow up in complex trauma and they are punished for being themselves, they are rejected, they are shamed for being themselves, people don't seem to want to connect with them, then they begin to go, being authentic is bad. Being authentic results in bad consequences. So if I want to be accepted, I can't be authentic. If I want to attach to people, I can't be authentic. If I don't want to get hurt, I can't be authentic. And so what comes out of that is a bunch of lies about authenticity, but more than that, they again go to shame beliefs. Something is wrong with me just the way I am. I am not good enough. Parts of me are bad. And so they begin to hate parts of themselves and have that low self-esteem, bad negative self-identity. But then they conclude that the only way then to get love, the only way to get respect, the only way to get acceptance, the only way to get connection is I must wear masks. I can't be authentic. And so the value then is to perform, to put on a role, to wear masks, to be what people want so that I get all of my needs met. And so you can see that this messes up their whole approach to future relationships, because it's based on a lie that authenticity never leads to intimate attachment. Authenticity always results in rejection and abandonment and negative things. And so if you come into a relationship and it's all about wearing masks, you're never going to have true connection. You're never going to have true intimacy. And so it sets up relationships to be frustrating, to feel empty, to feel boring, and to fail. There's more than that. They also get to adult life, and let's say they get into recovery, and then they go, who am I? I've always worn masks. I've always played roles. I don't even know who I am. And so they have this imposter syndrome. I'm a fake. I'm a phony. Everything I do is just performance. I'm never authentic. And they go through this, beat themselves up that they don't know who they are, that they're so fake. And so just again, negative repercussions when a child is not allowed to be authentic. And so authenticity and attachment, two key foundational things to healthy life, to healthy self-identity, to healthy relationships. Let me add a third, autonomy. So this one needs a bit of explanation so that you understand it. So a child comes into the world totally dependent, totally needing to attach, to have somebody meet their needs, but they don't become the other person they attach to. They're still separate from them. They're unique. They're autonomous. And so what we want them to do as they grow up is realize, yes, you need other people, but you're separate from other people. We want them to grow in autonomy so that they understand they're separate from other people, but that they learn more and more how to meet their own needs, but realize they still need others for some needs. So there's a fine line in there that we want them to find about what they're responsible for themselves and what they need others for, and what they're responsible for others and what they have to let others be responsible for themselves. And so that's autonomy. And so we want them to grow, to stand on their own 2 feet, to think for themselves, but not to be isolated from people, totally independent, thinking they don't need anybody. We still want them to be open to be influenced by others, but not to be gaslit by others. Such an important fine line for them. Beyond that, we want them to care for others, but also to realize I got to take care of myself. And I need to stand up for my own needs. We don't want them to become codependent and give up all their needs and just take care of the needs of others and think that their needs don't matter and put everybody ahead of themselves all the time. And so we want them to know unique individual in relationships with other people, but we want them to know where they start and end and where others start and end. And so that's done by showing a child healthy boundaries. And we again have done a whole series on this because it's such an important topic. But this autonomy piece is so important. And so what comes out of complex trauma families usually is distortions around this autonomy stuff. So families are either too enmeshed or too isolated, and we've done talks on that as well. But in this diagram you can see the child comes in, it needs autonomy, but it needs connection. But it can go too far in one direction or another. And so there's degrees here. So if you go too much connection, then you go into enmeshment or fusion. So I don't know now who I am. You become part of who I am, and I don't know where I end and you begin. Or you can go too far on the autonomy end at saying, I don't need anybody, and I'm going to isolate from everybody, and I'm going to be totally self-dependent. And so this autonomy connection or attachment becomes important to find the right balance in there. And complex trauma families tend to mess that up. I want to talk about something that we really haven't highlighted in the past that I hope will be really helpful for you. And that is one of the things that comes out of enmeshed families where children are trained to be codependent, where parents are into over-controlling, into everybody's business, where you're not healthy boundaries of privacy and you're responsible for that with yourself. I'm not going to do it for you. One of the things that comes out of that is engulfment. You're engulfed by your parents, by the family members. And so for many people that come out of that, what comes out of that is the fear of engulfment as they move into adult relationships. So we talk regularly about the fear of abandonment. I want to bring now beside that, the fear of engulfment, and have you think about that, and then I'm going to compare the fear of abandonment with the fear of engulfment and show how they're connected. So the fear of engulfment, you may have this fear and not even realize it. So definition is to fear that if you get too close to somebody emotionally, then you will be smothered by them and you will lose your freedom. So you're afraid that if you get too close to somebody, they will end up controlling you, dominating you. You will lose yourself in the relationship. Life will become totally about the other person, and you will lose who you are. They will just take over. That's the fear of engulfment. And I suspect that many of you can relate to that. So this again comes out of a family that was enmeshed, a family where children were trained to be codependent with the parent. So the child had to give up their needs all the time and just take care of the parents. The child was all about making sure dad didn't get angry, dad wasn't upset, and so it was all about dad's emotions and not their own. It was that constant, your needs don't matter, everybody else's needs are more important, and so you become all about thinking like dad, knowing dad's emotions better than your own, taking care of everybody else's needs, sacrificing your needs. You get dominated. You lose yourself in these relationships. So that's what many of you have gone through. But it can also happen where you get a child in a family where it looks like they're getting tons of attention from the parents, and you go, this seems so healthy. They're getting tons of validation about how good they are, and it seems really wonderful. But what you begin to realize is there's a subtle pressure constantly being exerted on the child that they have to fit a certain role, a role that the parents have planned for that child. So The parents think this child, in order to kind of meet the parents' image needs to end up in this career with this social standing in life, and they're constantly pressuring the child. So it looks like the child's getting tons of attention, but it's manipulative attention. That's an enmeshment type of thing too. Somebody has said this: a child may grow up with parents or family members that had bigger needs than the child. Mental illness, disability, substance abuse, etc. The larger needs of the parents and family overshadow their experience of childhood. Children in these circumstances may have had to provide emotional or physical support to the caregiver, which is called parentification. And so, in other words, the needs of the parents or people in the family were bigger than the child's own, so they got engulfed by it. They lost who they were. Their needs ended up not mattering. So let me show that there's a connection here between fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment. Because in both cases, what you find in the child is that they don't feel they have the power in themselves to do what they need to do, to take care of themselves. So there's this lack of power, this feeling of powerlessness, helplessness. With that, they feel that there's something inherently wrong with themselves that causes people not to accept them. So others try to dominate them, or others abandon them because there's something wrong with themselves. So with abandonment, the child is thinking, if people see the authentic me, they're not going to like it and they're going to abandon me. But how can I survive without these people? I need these people to love me. So there's fear of abandonment now that comes in, which is, I can't take care of myself. I don't know how to love myself. I need others to do that for me. So I have this lack of power to take care of myself and love myself. With engulfment is, nobody lets me be who I am. They smother me. I can't say no. I can't set boundaries. I feel trapped and controlled. So their lack of power is to stand up for themselves and set boundaries. They feel powerless to stop others from controlling them. So that lack of power. So let me just give you some characteristics of the fear of engulfment, and you can go through the checklist and see how many of them apply to you. So for a person with the fear of engulfment, a hug may feel threatening because you feel you're going to now get consumed by that person if you give into that hug. You may alternate between your need for attachment, I want to be close, but your fear of getting close because then you're going to get engulfed. And so you're going to send out mixed messages to people. I want you to be close to me. I don't want you to be close to me. Or you may have very rigid boundaries with people. You're not going to let anybody get close. And so you got very rigid boundaries. That leads to, you may be prone to be an isolator because that's the only tool you know to keep people from engulfing you. Many with the fear of engulfment are just not able to receive love from people. They just can't allow themselves to absorb love from people because they think if they allow somebody to love them, then they're obligated to that person. A person with the fear of engulfment may have trouble responding to the pain of others. So they see somebody else in pain, but they're afraid that if they show compassion to that person, then they're obligated to them. They're going to get drawn in and enmeshed with that person. So they just don't know what to do with the pain of others. A person with the fear of engulfment may have a lot of ambivalence towards committing to somebody, and they might even avoid commitment to somebody because they always need an escape hatch in case stuff gets too much. So commitment becomes a scary thing. There's a fear that kindness and love from others always has strings attached. So somebody is loving me or is kind to me, what do they want from me? If somebody shows affection to them, they automatically just start to feel suffocated. They can't enjoy it. It just immediately triggers something that causes them to feel suffocated. And so they spend their life keeping others at arm's distance. Even in good relationships, they often feel that that person just wanting to relate is intruding on their space. If their partner shares their emotions and their needs, often they are exhausted by that. It just takes so much out of them to be part of absorbing somebody else's pain and struggles. And so that causes them to, as soon as the relationship has challenges or their partner is struggling, they just want to escape. They just want to flee because they think now they have to take care of that partner. And that's just too much. So their stress just internally goes through the roof. Often what happens with a person with the fear of engulfment is they assume that nobody's going to hear them for who they are or see them for who they are. They're always going to be just pushed into a role and that they have to take others. So they never totally feel seen and heard. They're constantly wary of and afraid that they're going to be exploited and used by people, or nobody's going to take care of them, deprived. For many, intimacy feels like a trap. It's a very desirable thing that they want, but as soon as you give into it, you're trapped. Some desire to have more than one relationship because they don't want to commit to just one person because then they would be trapped. So they always want to have a couple options available. They get in a relationship and the immediate fear is that the needs of the other person are going to become more important than their own. That results in sometimes they get in a relationship and they're just a numbness they have towards their partner. They don't want to show too much attachment, too much connection, too much intimacy, too much closeness, too much emotion, because that might draw them in too far. And so they have this numbness that their partner just can't seem to get past. Sometimes they even develop a resentment of their partner or of the relationship because it's just too demanding. It just causes always something they have to be giving themselves to and making sacrifices for. So they develop a resentment towards it. And then for many, there's a difficulty in being able to express emotions, because if they express emotions, then their partner might show compassion to them, and then they're going to feel trapped. Now they're obligated. So that's 21 different characteristics of the fear of engulfment. That might be surprising to you to see how many of those are true of you. Let me take that a little bit further. Can you see that people with the fear of engulfment actually also have the fear of abandonment? It's got two parts to it. Part of it is, if you engulf me, then I am going to have to take care of you and I'll have to abandon myself. So I'm afraid of abandoning myself if I get in a relationship with you. So there's the fear of abandonment there. But then, if you engulf me, you're going to find out who I really am. And then you're going to abandon me. So, or engulfment is just a step on the road that's eventually going to lead to abandonment. So the way to avoid being abandoned is to never get engulfed. Because by getting engulfed, you get to see me and then you'll abandon me. So fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment are connected. Something that you might find very interesting is that fear of engulfment people are often attracted to fear of abandonment people. So fear of abandonment, I pursue you, please don't abandon me. Fear of engulfment, I run away, don't engulf me. And so you have that chasing of each other, and that often forms relationships. So let me compare kind of a fear of engulfment person with a fear of abandonment person that end up together, and you can follow this checklist and see how you do. So fear of abandonment person, often very clingy, very needy. Fear of engulfment, I need more space. So fear of abandonment, small bubble. Fear of engulfment, big bubble. Okay? Fear of abandonment, overly attentive. If I take care of all of your needs all the time, then you're not going to abandon me. Fear of engulfment person, you're smothering me. You're smothering me. Stop doing that. Or they just take attention for granted. Oh, you're going to give me all this attention, and they begin to expect it. Next one, fear of abandonment person, often willingly shares, tells you whatever's going on inside them. I want you to know me. I want you to know all my feelings so you don't abandon me. Fear of engulfment person, I don't want to share stuff with you because then you're going to get too involved in my life. And so they develop secrets. They may even have a secret life, and often get angry if you ask me too many questions about how was my day, how am I doing. I don't want to tell you that. And so again, you can see that there's going to be issues in those relationships, but they are attracted to each other. Fear of abandonment person, take more care of their partner than they do of themselves. Engulfment person, I want to be taken care of, but I don't want to reciprocate. And so sometimes they even go, I feel entitled to you taking care of me because you've been doing all along, but don't ask me to take care of you. Fear of abandonment, feel they never can give enough. Engulfment, often they need to be in control. And so it's not so much about giving, whereas fear of abandonment is all about, I got to give, so you don't abandon me. Fear of engulfment is, I need to be in control so you don't smother me. Next one, fear of abandonment. Very porous boundaries. So some days, this is what I need to do, these are what our boundaries are, but as soon as they get the fear of abandonment, oh, let's forget those boundaries because I don't want you to leave me. And so they can then begin to tolerate abuse, neglect, even infidelity because I don't want you to leave me. Fear of engulfment, often very rigid boundaries. Don't you ever get close. If you ever do this to me, I'm out of here. Very different when it comes to boundaries. Next one, fear of abandonment often becomes addicted to the partner. I'm going to give. I'm going to put up with stuff because I need you, almost like a drug. Okay? Fear of engulfment, often they withhold from the partner. Sometimes they'll seduce the partner, acting like they're going to meet their needs, but then they withhold, and because they don't want to get engulfed. And so you get the one desperate for the other and the one playing games with the other. Not good. Next one, fear of abandonment. They just want ongoing affection. They just yearn for constant validation, constant affection, just so that they're convinced you're not going to abandon them. Fear of engulfment person, they get angered by that neediness. You always want assurances. I've told you once I love you, that's good enough. And so that creates conflict. Next one, fear of abandonment person, they get excited if they see their partner showing emotions and their partner getting excited about something. That encourages them. Hey, good things are happening. We're having a good time. Fear of engulfment person, they get annoyed when their partner gets all emotional and exuberant because that takes too much energy and they might have to get involved in that and they don't want to get involved in that. So that creates problems. Next one, fear of abandonment person. Often they use sex in order to get love, or in order to try to prove that they love, in order to make sure that the person won't abandon them, in order to try to fix conflicts so that the person won't abandon them. So sex is something that is part of keeping a person from abandoning me. Fear of engulfment person, sex is often something you give a person so that you substitute it for closeness. I'll give you sex just to go through the act so that we don't have to have true intimacy, or they use sex as a way to manipulate and get what they want. Next one, fear of abandonment person. It's kind of, I need you with me all the time. I need you as my constant companion. Stay with me, do everything with me. Fear of engulfment person is, I need space. You just stay there, and if I want to see you, I'll come and see you. I'll come and go as I please. You let me be. Next one, fear of abandonment. They seek connection and closeness. Fear of engulfment. I want to be connected, but not close. And so a subtle difference, but it creates major issues. Fear of abandonment person. If their partner's not around, they just feel at a loss. They don't know what to do with themselves. They're panicking. They're antsy because they need their partner around. Fear of engulfment person. They start to feel annoyed if their partner's around too much. Extended togetherness is something they don't enjoy. So they need big breaks from that. So you can see that's going to cause problems. Next one, fear of abandonment person. They show fear but hide their anger, because if I get angry, you might abandon me. Fear of engulfment person. They show anger but hide their fear. So again, very different. Next one, fear of abandonment person. They always feel they're walking on eggshells so that I don't do something to get you upset with me because then you might abandon me. And so I also feel that I'm always compromising and giving in to you so that you don't abandon me. Fear of engulfment person. If they sense things are getting too close, then often they will create conflict, pick fights, lash out, create chaos, in order to establish some distance, in order to keep you away for a while. How are you doing? Next one, fear of abandonment person. They feel distress about the coming and goings of others because they just need that constancy. Where fear of engulfment person, they feel distress about giving and receiving from others, to others. That's just too demanding. That just requires too much. That stirs up too much fear. Next one, fear of abandonment person. Their needs become neediness. Fear of engulfment. Their needs become expectations. Entitlement. Next one, fear of abandonment person. They reach out to others and that looks like love, but actually it could be just fear of being alone. And so what looks like love is actually fear dressed up like love. Whereas fear of engulfment person, they can look very cold, they can look very unloving, but actually what they're trying to do is hide the terror of intimacy. So both are driven by fear. And that is what I want you to see. It just shows very differently. What's always interesting is that fear of abandonment person, they may actually be the person that just gets tired of this other person who's afraid of engulfment, and they may end up abandoning. So they end up creating and doing the very thing they're afraid of. The fear of engulfment person, they may be the one who's so afraid of engulfment, but then they begin to notice that they are afraid of being abandonment. And they don't begin to realize that till the other person leaves them. And then all of a sudden it goes, wow, that hurts. And they realize they've got a fear of abandonment as part of their fear of engulfment. So I hope that just gives you a new perspective on complex trauma, understanding complex trauma, a new perspective on relationships, and understanding this fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment and how they can really do damage. So those are the first 3 A's. So attachment, so huge. Authenticity and autonomy. Next time we'll get to the next A's. I hope that's helpful to you. That's the end of our Friday night. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.